Today, we will explore how medieval soldiers actually acquired their equipment for war, from the simplest spear to the sophisticated plate armor that defined the armored knight on European battlefields. Before continuing with the video, remember to subscribe to the channel for more documentary narratives like this. Imagine a young English peasant in the 14th century seeing, for the first time, a fully equipped knight passing through his small village. The sunlight glinting off the chainmail, the polished helmet completely concealing the warrior's face, the sword hanging at his waist, and the shield adorned with heraldic symbols he could not decipher. To that young man, born among pigs and barley fields, the knight seemed like a being from another world, a creature made of metal and power. What he did not know, and likely never would, was the extraordinary financial and logistical effort required to transform an ordinary man into that walking machine of war. This is the story of how medieval soldiers truly equipped themselves for battle. A complex process involving family inheritance, gifts from lords, purchases in international markets, and even the grim act of stripping the dead on blood-soaked battlefields. The medieval era lasted for approximately 1,000 years, from the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century to the end of the 15th century. During this vast period, the nature of warfare changed dramatically, and with it, the equipment used by combatants. In the early period, body protection consisted primarily of chainmail, intricate networks of interlinked metal rings that required hundreds of hours of craftsmanship to produce. Over the centuries, metallurgical technology advanced, allowing for increasingly sophisticated plate armor that would eventually cover a warrior from head to toe. Regardless of the period, however, one truth remained constant. Equipping oneself for war was extraordinarily expensive, and how a soldier obtained his equipment often determined not only his effectiveness in battle, but also his position within the rigid medieval social hierarchy. To fully understand the challenge of equipping a medieval soldier, we must first examine what he actually needed to bring to war. The list extended far beyond weapons and armor. A combatant required tools to maintain his equipment, utensils for eating and drinking, camping materials, clothing for varying weather conditions, and, in the case of mounted troops, all the gear necessary for his horse. Each of these items represented a financial investment, and together they formed an economic burden few could bear alone. Historical records provide a clear sense of the costs involved. In the 1360s, for example, a lower quality chainmail shirt in England cost around 16 shillings. To put this into perspective, an English archer earned about 4 pence per day, and there were 12 pence in a shilling. This means that even a basic chainmail shirt represented more than a month of continuous labor for an average archer. A higher quality one would cost significantly more. Additional defensive equipment, such as a breastplate with shoulder defenses or a sturdy shield, could cost around 25 shillings, while a full combat armor for a lancer approached 80 shillings. These were sums representing months or even years of labor for most people. Weapons, though generally cheaper than armor, still consumed a substantial portion of a soldier's resources. A spear or functional sword could be purchased for about 2 shillings, roughly 4 days' wages for our hypothetical archer. However, quality varied greatly. A simple utilitarian sword cost a fraction of a blade forged by master craftsmen from renowned centers such as Toledo in Spain or Solingen in Germany. These high-quality blades, made from high-carbon steel and often decorated with elaborate engravings, could cost several pounds, far beyond the reach of ordinary soldiers. Those unable to afford high-quality gear relied on cheaper alternatives. Instead of full metal armor, a poor soldier typically wore a simple helmet, padded or reinforced clothing, and carried a shield. Offensively, they relied on lower-quality swords or spears, which were cheaper due to their simplicity. This basic equipment was often mandated by authorities. In many medieval societies, laws specified exactly what equipment each free citizen had to own based on their wealth. One notable example was the Assize of Arms, issued by King Henry II of England in 1181. This decree required all free men to possess arms in service of the king, with severe penalties for non-compliance. The document detailed exactly what each man must own. Knights were required to have chainmail, shield, and lance. Landowners needed a hauberk and a spear. Even the poorest free men had to possess at least a spear and an iron helmet. This effectively mobilized the entire nation for defense. Interestingly, the assize also regulated inheritance. If a man died, his weapons were to pass to his heir. If the heir was too young, a guardian was required to ensure the equipment was used in service until the heir came of age. This reveals a practical understanding that military equipment was too valuable to remain idle. As production methods improved, costs gradually decreased. By the 16th century, infantry soldiers could acquire weapons more affordably, and mass-produced munition armor allowed armies to equip large numbers of troops. However, equipment was not a one-time purchase. It required constant maintenance. Soldiers often carried tools such as whetstones, or relied on armorers who traveled with armies to repair damaged gear. Beyond weapons and armor, soldiers needed clothing, tents, food, drink, ammunition, and horse fodder. Individually inexpensive, these costs accumulated over time and could surpass the initial cost of equipment. Mounted troops required enormous logistical support. Records indicate that one wagon was needed for every 10 knights, and even a basic horse cost about 20 shillings, 40 days of an archer's wages. War horses could cost 10 times more. With these costs in mind, how did soldiers acquire their gear? Inheritance was one of the primary methods, especially among the nobility, but also among common families. Unlike the dramatic portrayals in fantasy, inheritance was usually a practical transfer of used equipment through wills and legal documents. That said, legendary items did exist, such as Joyeuse, the sword of Charlemagne, though these were symbolic rather than practical battlefield tools. Equipment could also be received as gifts or loans, especially from lords. By the late medieval period, aristocrats increasingly outfitted their troops themselves. For example, English archers from Cheshire wore standardized uniforms. Cities also maintained armories to equip citizens. These included not only personal gear, but also larger defensive weapons, such as springalds. If none of these options were available, soldiers could purchase equipment. Contrary to popular belief, the medieval arms industry was vast and international. Cities like Milan were major production centers, with hundreds of craftsmen producing and exporting weapons across Europe. However, fraud was common. Merchants would stamp cheap armor with fake marks from famous cities like Nuremberg to sell at higher prices. The battlefield itself was another major source of equipment. Looting was common, though often regulated to ensure fair distribution. However, not all battlefields were looted, as seen in the Battle of Visby, 1361, where thousands were buried with their equipment intact due to decomposition. After the Battle of Agincourt, 1415, King Henry V ordered soldiers to take only what they could carry and burn the rest to maintain mobility. Ultimately, medieval soldiers had many ways to obtain equipment, though it was far easier for the wealthy. Yet, war also provided rare opportunities for social mobility. Soldiers were paid based on their equipment, meaning that acquiring better gear could elevate both income and status. For example, English archers in the Hundred Years' War could rise to become men-at-arms, tripling their income and changing their social class entirely. Armor was not just protection, it was a visible marker of status. Well-equipped soldiers were valuable prisoners, while poorly equipped infantry were often killed outright. Maintaining this equipment required constant effort, whether through personal skill or access to specialized craftsmen. When we imagine medieval knights, we often overlook the complex economic system behind them. Each fully equipped knight was the product of a vast network involving miners, craftsmen, merchants, and years of labor. This is the true story of how medieval soldiers equipped themselves, a story of cost, opportunity, and survival. If you've made it this far, it means you share our fascination with history. Subscribe to continue exploring these incredible stories. Leave a comment with your thoughts, and don't forget to like the video. Together, we will keep uncovering the stories that shaped our world.